sorry. But I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. I don't want to rule or conquer anyone. I should like to help everyone if possible. Jew, Gentile, black man, white. We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate, has goose-stepped us into misery and bloodshed. We have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. Machinery that gives abundance has left us in want. Our knowledge has made us cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. Without these qualities, life will be violent and all will be lost. The aeroplane and the radio have brought us closer together. The very nature of these inventions cries out for the goodness in men, cries out for universal brotherhood, for the unity of us all. Even now, my voice is reaching millions throughout the world, millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people. To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish. Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes. Men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fodder. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines. You are not cattle. You are men. You have the love of humanity in your hearts. You don't hate, only the unloved hate, the unloved and the unnatural. Soldiers, don't fight for slavery, fight for liberty. In the 17th chapter of St. Luke it is written, the kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men, but in all men, in you. You, the people, have the power to create machines, the power to create happiness. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure. Then in the name of democracy, let us use that power. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world, a decent world, that will give men a chance to work, that will give youth a future and old age a security. By the promise of these things, brutes have risen to power, but they lie. They do not fulfill that promise. They never will. Dictators free themselves, but they enslave the people. Now let us fight to fulfill that promise. Let us fight to free the world, to do away with national barriers, to do away with greed, with hate and intolerance. Let us fight for a world of reason, a world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Soldiers, in the name of democracy, let us all unite!
Hello, everyone. Today, I bring to you an inspiring dialogue with Anjali Monteiro and KP Jayasankar. Their partnership of 40 years has led to creation of several books and documentary films about social issues. They both retired from the School of Media and Cultural Studies at Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai. For anyone who is interested in understanding the dynamics of media, past, present, and the future, and look for ways to have an influence on social imagination, and through it, on a more ethical, just, equitable future, the dialogue with Anjali and Jayasankar will reveal some pathways to the future. I learned a lot. You will too. Marshall McLuhan once said, "We drive into the future only by looking into the rear view mirror. That's the crux of all the problem we see today. We are obsessed with the past. Our view of the road ahead is blinded. A dialogue with Jayasankar and Anjali will remove our blinders and prepare us to observe, listen to real stories of real people in the real world, and get back in touch with our own innate desire for harmony, peace, and justice. So over to Anjali and Jayasankar. So, hello, Anjali and Jayasankar. It's such a pleasure to meet you. So, what state do you feel? Do you feel in a state of hope? Do you feel in a state of anxiety, concern? What do you feel?
I think, at least for me, it sort of shuttles. I would like to feel hope, but at times it's not easy to hope.
Yeah, I think I still have hope because this will also pass.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it has happened in the past, and it's bound to change.
Yeah, but the kind of attack on hearts and minds that the present dispensation represents, I think, is unprecedented. And that's what's the insidious changes, I think, are more scary than the obvious ones, the way in which, to hate has become normalized. I think that is the most scary thing, and how this is penetrating everywhere into school curricula, into the conversation people make, the kinds of media they share, the casual remarks they make about other communities. I think that's what's really painful and disturbing. And this is not the India that we have grown up in, the kind of
signed up for, so to speak.
Yeah, but I will provide my perspective on this. In my work, I travel around the world to study people, culture, and change. And more recently, I've been studying the youth and their mindsets, their dreams, their aspirations. And I'm beginning to believe, going into people's homes, even in places like Russia, for example, I realized that by now I have traveled to more than 50 countries, had deep conversations, more than 12,000 people in the last 30 years, ethnographic interviews. And I have got more faith in foundational human traits, regardless of political structures within which people live. And I do believe that it's very easy to stoke our natural proclivity for fear, hate, jealousy, all these negative things that get in the way of positive, constructive thinking. But those emotions are not sustainable. People get burnt out. I think we survive through healing, and these don't allow for healing. And the voice of healing, the forces of healing, people instinctively search for when they feel burnt out, hurt, anxious, even with their own emotions. And that's where I feel this will pass.
Yeah,
but it'll leave behind a trail of destruction, because it'll take many years for us to cleanse whatever damage has been done. That's my worry. But I'm sure this is going to pass.
Yes.
Yeah, and what you're saying is true. When I mean, we've spent a lot of our lives, energies, working with young people. In fact, learning a lot from young people, and certainly I think they inspire far more hope, than our own generation, in a sense. Because a lot of them do have a lot of fire in their bellies. They have a lot of course, anxieties too, angst. But I think that, when I think of young people, I do feel more hopeful.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we've been fortunate enough to be working with communities for about over 4 decades. And, the kind of hope, the kind of wisdom, the kind of learning that we have had has been tremendous, So, and we have worked with communities and subjects who are not traditionally thought of as wise or educated, but we have learned much from them than our own teachers or the university system we've been part of.
So that takes me to a good question is, can you just tell us about, you guys have together a journey of almost 40 years. Tell us about your journey and what you have learned along that journey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I guess in a sense, both of us are self-taught filmmakers, self-taught documentary filmmakers. We kind of strayed into filmmaking, each of us from a different, starting point. And in a sense, we've sort of been making films on themes that interest us, that fascinate us. And when we look back at that journey, there seems to be some kind of a pattern that emerges, which was not entirely, it was not intentional, but I think it's something that happened because of our concerns, and a lot of our concerns have to do with issues of us and them, issues of identity, issues of questioning the kinds of relationships of power that are there between, say, filmmakers and subjects, between filmmakers and the audience, and somehow our films have, through our concerns, have explored those pathways.
Yeah. No, and as documentary filmmakers, we think of ourselves as sutradhars, tentative bearers of very multiple complex threads of narratives. As teachers, researchers, and documentary filmmakers all put together. And these threads are probably not within our control. So neither in their performance or their reception and interpretation, the kind of narratives that one is inserting oneself into. There are always so many possibilities for both our subject as well as our audiences to put their foot into the narrative that one is constructing and taking us to uncharted realms, and which has helped us in many ways to kind of tell us something about ourselves and also our relationship with our own text, the world, and also brought us to moments of crisis. And we would think that these moments of crisis sometimes are like moments of epiphany that have shaped our practice, our own worldviews, and ourselves, and our own collaboration as well.
We like the idea of Sutradhar because, it also relates to, various Indian performative traditions, and allows, it's a space that allows for a kind of reflexivity, for critical, sort of interrogation of oneself also. And of course, as a theatrical device, from Natya Shastra, where it sort of was more the idea of, the marionette manipulator, to various folk theatre traditions across India, which, modern playwrights who have, also used the idea of Sutradhar to look at contemporary themes. So in many ways, I think, imagining ourselves as Sutradhars allows us possibilities of, looking critically at ourselves, looking critically at our world, and creating, collaborative possibilities between ourselves and our subjects.
So I have one question here. So since childhood, I've been in theater also. I've learned mime. Also, my uncle, Vrindavan Dandavate, was very closely associated with Marathi theater. He was...
I know Vrindavan.
Yeah, so,
I knew him.
yeah, so he was a part of Rangayan, then Avishka.
Yeah.
Of course, my kaki was from the Kamerkar family. So I've had a chance to even witness the Chabildas movement. And I've seen the close interaction between the audience and the actors. And there is so much direct participation and exchange of energy and dialogue. So my question is, when you use the word of Sutradhar, how does the dialogue between the audience, unlike theater where there is presence of audience and actor in that space, how does the dialogue between the Sutradhar or the actor and the audience happen in case of digital media?
Yeah. So, that's where I said, for example, we, in our films and in our work, we try to use the idea of reflexivity, where we kind of try to include as many moments where the subjects, for example, documentary film could look like a seamless construction of reality, but we would like to include within it narrative disruptions, include within it moments where the subjects turn around and speak to us as filmmakers, and therefore, when they are speaking to us, they are also speaking to the audience. And thus making the whole process of construction itself, available to both the audience as well as, any interpretative practice. That's how we have done it. I know that it's difficult, so each medium has to find a way of kind of questioning and putting its own location in a space where critique is possible. That's how we have done. For example, that's why, recently we had a talk here in Goa, and we kind of used some of those moments which we had, which kind of illustrate this idea that we're talking about. And we structured the entire talk about it, our talk around these ideas. For example, we started off with this film that we made, set in Yerwara Central Prison. It was made in 1997. It's a film about prisoners who wrote poetry.
It's called YCP 1997.
Yes. So one of the most, it was a life-changing experience for us, being in a prison, speaking to so-called people who are, in conflict with the law. So when we actually went there for the first time, we met this Nigerian poet prisoner, and his name is Harrison, and he asked us this very, very significant question. He said, "Do you think you're free?" And then he went on to give us a very, very startling answer to that question. He says, it's a matter of the size of the prison. We live in small prisons, and you live in slightly larger prisons. That kind of, it's an idea that kind of animates our work in many ways, which kind of allows us to bring questions which would question our own normality, so to speak, and the things that we take for granted every day.
You see, it depends what you mean by jail. It is whether you mean an assembling of houses where some people are kept, or you intend a state of imprisonment, which is not on the outside actually, but in the inside. Those who are strong and have a certain temper in their maturity, then they will understand and use this place as a stepping stone. Otherwise, you finish your sentence, you go out, you start again. getting sucked again in this vicious circle and repeating again and again. Now, this is not what I've chosen to do. I've not seen the world for many years. I was going to ask you whether it is still there, you know?
And it's also helped us question our own privileges.
Yeah, so I said in many ways, you know, as filmmakers, we enter, you know, spaces of the others who are different from us, whether it's by social class or, you know, ethnicity or various other markers of identity. And I think we've always been very conscious of how we negotiate, you know, these differences, whether it's in the field when, you know, we are with our subjects or within the, you know, the film text itself that we create. And in a sense, this Harrison's way of putting it, you know, really kind of questions so fundamentally the kinds of hierarchies we set up between us and so-called, you know, less privileged others. And I think it's something that we carry very closely in our hearts. And, you know, in many ways, it sort of resonates with us in all our you know, relationships, you know, with our subjects.
When we were constructing the narrative, we decided not to kind of ask this question at all. What is your crime? Or what is it that brings you here into the prison? Because we decided not to go there at all. We wanted to kind of interact with them as, you know, two creative professionals interacting with another set of creative subjects who write poetry. So we decided to look at this idea of which Harrison gave us a clue to, the idea of the state of imprisonment we are all in and how we can actually collectively talk about the idea of unfreedom and freedom, if I may put it that way. And it's ironic when, for example, it was made in 1997, when we screened this film, many people would kind of raise this question as, why didn't you put their crime? There's a vicarious pleasure people get out of this voyeurism that is, you know, peeping into their lives and constructing them as deviants so that I can assert my own normality. And people would ask, why don't you put their crime as a part of their title? In fact, we always kind of shocked by that idea because, you know, if you really ask have you committed crimes in our lives? And the answer invariably is going to be yes. The only difference probably is that, you know, we have had privileges or we have not been caught and we are not in prison. It's not that all of us actually violate established laws in small ways and, you know, or big ways as well. But we have the idea that the criminal itself is a construct, and, you know, we need to look at it very closely and redefine the idea of prison. That kind of was something, and which it's a thread that continues in our work.
That's beautiful. What I take away from that incident is, once I was reading an edited compilation of anthropological notes, and one of the articles, I think it was written by Clifford Geertz, but I'm not sure. It said, reality is an amalgamation of multiple illusions. And then, of course, he went on to explain that it didn't necessarily mean illusion, but any truth only has multiple perspectives, and to understand reality, one has to understand multiple perspectives through which different people view that reality, perceive it, and understand it and feel it. And I think that has guided my journey since that I read that book, is to not just hold on to my view of the world, because then I'm only seeing Earth as flat, but to see it from multiple perspectives so I understand the richness of what being in this world means, and from other people's perspective. And I think we need to liberate people from this one-sided view of the world or self-centered view of the world, because there is so much more joy in letting go of your perspective and embracing those other perspectives that we never have access to. So that's what I take away from that incident that you mentioned.
Yeah, in fact, you know, I mean, in our own experience, we found, you know, tremendous creativity and wisdom in all kinds of spaces, you know, and we've learned so much from it. So, for instance, you know, in around you know 2001, we began interacting with a filmmaker who what should I say, a budding filmmaker who lived in Dharavi, and his name was Waqar Khan, and he wanted to produce materials for communal amity. And of course, he had a friend called Bhau Kode, who was an old friend of ours. And, you know, after the 92-93 communal violence, both Bhau Kode and Waqar Khan happened to meet. And they did such remarkable work to heal, you know, and to bring communities back together through various kinds of events, through basically creating spaces for dialogue, you know, for kind of exploring differences and diffusing, you know, the tension that differences can bring. And so we decided, and then we sort of, Waqar actually met us when he was making his first film. And of course, Bhau brought him to us because he thought that since we're filmmakers, you know, we could give him some advice. And he was making a short promo. And I mean, initially his script was a little simplistic, and we kind of, you know, didn't take it that seriously, you know. But we decided that this would be a very interesting sort of entry point to do something on Dharavi, because for many years we'd been, in fact, going to Dharavi, talking with you know, groups there, and wanting to make a film, but not really finding a peg. So we began to sort of follow Waqar and Bhau in the process of their making, you know, their film. And I think that experience was sort of such a learning experience for us. And, you know, I think really, you know, our respect for Waqar, both as a filmmaker and as an activist and as a human being, grew so much, because, you know, what sort of we can do with our films is not a fraction of, you know, what he was able to do with his work. Of course, he's no more now, he passed away. But that was a very sort of, what shall I say, experience that humbled us, you know.
I understand. In fact, I would say that, you know, as a trained filmmaker, regardless of whether you're trained at FTII or at TISS or Nirmala Niketan, as Nitin was trained there, I think it developed certain knowledge of the technology, the storytelling structures, and so on. But I think what is richer in this case is they bring their life experience, their questions and concerns to a medium that they don't have expertise in. And they're using you as just like almost like real world trainers to translate their story into something that is effective. So I'm reminded of, I don't know if you heard about an initiative called Usha Hidi.
No.
So this was somewhere in Africa, I don't remember where, when there was so much corruption and malpractices in elections. Somebody came up with the idea of using smartphones as a way of, at a grassroots level, people reporting malpractices, capturing them and aggregating them on a website called Usha Hidi. And there they would provide like almost like a geographic map of where those malpractices are happening as a way of countering the state-sponsored or political party-sponsored corruption in the field. And I found that very fascinating that you're giving video as a tool in the hands of everyday people, because mobile phone had become so ubiquitous even at that time. And I was reminded of that. I was listening to this story is, can we actually counter the politics of knowledge and the ethical compromises that are being made by giving power of media in people's hand? Or do you think of it, that problem and a possible solution to that in any different ways?
No, I think certainly, I mean, what you say is very interesting. And it kind of, I think it calls for a different way of looking at the relationship between media and people, you know. A lot of the time, the traditional way in which that relationship has been conceived is of people as, you know, helpless dupes of the media. You know, the media has this kind of impact, and then people have to be protected from the media through censorship. You know, that kind of very paternalistic sort of understanding of the relationship between media and its audiences, and particularly if those audiences are you know, people who are seen as, you know, disadvantaged, whether it is by class or, you know, geographical area or whatever. But I think we really need to, you know, turn this on its head and, you know, understand how, you know, technologies sort of allow for much more creative ways in which people sort of interact with media, and they're doing it on their own. I mean, people like Vakar, people in a number of social movements are taking the camera into their hands and doing all kinds of amazing things. And, you know, the language that they're using, the media language that they're using may be very different from the languages that we might use. But I think there's a lot we can learn from that. A lot of the time they would use much more, you know, rather than a documentary format, for instance, fictional format, or, you know, sort of music, or, you know, melodrama, you know. And I think probably those languages are more effective. They create you know, dialogue with certain kinds of audiences much more than you know, the kinds of media languages that we might use. So
Jayasankar, I have a question for you. When I look at the current scenario, I'm also reminded of the emergency days when media was muzzled and people even in the villages were turning on to BBC at that time. There was only radio. There wasn't much of TV that time. In today's environment, when knowledge is being controlled, information is being controlled, digital media is being controlled, algorithms are being written to track people. In this situation, I still see people have phones in their hand. There are other kinds of YouTube-like platforms are coming up where independent media content creators have a place. What do you think as like so my question, let me frame it the right way. I see knowledge being imparted or information being bombarded, but there is consciousness and awareness. There is a craving for that, for craving for truth, craving for knowing what's going on, that still exists in people's minds, regardless of the indoctrination. What do you think is the new emerging shape of media? Is there hope there? Or are we just destined to live in a controlled state of information?
Yeah, I think in spite of all that controls, you know, it's also illusory in some sense, because we have always believed that the idea of censorship is neither desirable nor possible, given the kind of, you know, proliferation of technologies where people are talking to each other. And, you know, if you were to look back, you know, many years ago, there were the idea of control or of media production itself was, you know, by controlling materials that people could access to produce media, so to speak. You know, the case in point is Anand Patwardhan's first film, The Emergency. He had to kind of scavenge around for film stock, which he kind of managed to expose here. And smuggle out of India and print it back, and Waves of Revolution. So, there was so much control over the access to raw material to produce media. And now, of course, the kind of control shifted to other modes where when video came in, for example, it made it a little less difficult to produce media, because as opposed to, say, celluloid or 16 mm or 35 mm, it was easier to produce, though still it was expensive. So there the control then began to shift to the not access to raw material, but to your ability to distribute and disseminate. So, for example, video was brought under the control ambit of censorship regimes in India. And then, of course, now it's very difficult to, control dissemination with the kind of channels that are available. Of course, there is gatekeeping. There are algorithms that work.
Not only that, but every time, you see, India probably has the maximum number of internet shutdowns of any country in the world. Yes. So anytime there is, trouble anywhere, Manipur, there's this thing, internet shutdown. So
I have a quick question. The kind of documentaries you make, do you have to run them through Censor Board of India?
Well, if we want to distribute them publicly, we have to. If we want to show them in a cinema theater, though of course this whole definition of public is quite sort of ambiguous within the law itself, so as to allow the government to control all kinds of venues where things are screened. But yeah, some of our films we did get a censor certificate because we wanted to have it screened theatrically, but some of our films don't have a censor certificate. And within the documentary movement itself, there is this kind of debate about over censorship, and there's no consensus. Some people feel that no, whatever it is, we will never give our films for censorship. And other people feel that it's a more strategic kind of choice that one makes, because whoever is screening your film can get into trouble if it doesn't have a censor certificate.
If you have to send a film to a festival, do you have to run it through a censor board?
No, festival has a slightly different kind of modus. If there is no censor certificate for the film, then it has the list of films with synopsis is sent to the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, and they take a look at it and grant permission for screening. But in recent times, there have been a number of films that have, been sort of, festivals have had films rejected at that level because of, just on the basis of their synopsis, And of course, there's been mobilization by documentary filmmakers around that. People have gone to court and all kinds of things. So, yeah. But film festivals also, they have to seek exemption to show the film.
So that brings me to a question. If you look at the global view of filmmaking, what percentage of countries actually have censorship, like a formal board of censorship for films?
Mm-hmm.
Is it more prevalent, or is it just like one-off in people who have a more of a controlling political structure?
Yeah. I think in many countries it has moved from the idea of censorship to the idea of certification. And even in India, it is called, Central Board of Film Certification. But here it tends to operate in a more sensorial way than it does in many other countries in the world, where it's just certifying what kind of, for instance, age appropriate, guidelines,
parental
guidance. So, but here I think it tends to take on, and depending on the regime and power also, of course. But I would think in India, almost all regimes are happy to use the power that they have to, kind of prevent things that are inconvenient to them from being screened, I think.
I see treason And censorship is kind of emerging out of same kind of mindset, whereas there is no tolerance for dissent and for representing ugliness of the society. In fact, I remember a lot of people even criticize Satyajit Ray for presenting the ugliness of Indian poverty to the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how do filmmakers take into account the prevailing or emerging or ideal ethical framework? Have you taken it into account, and how?
Yeah, for us, I think what matters primarily is the ethical sort of component of our relationship with our subjects, and how we represent them, and how much control do we give them over their own representation of themselves. So for instance, one thing which we always do, and we've done it, for right from the beginning of our journey, is that when we make a film, the first people we show it to is the protagonists of the film themselves, and we ask them how they feel about it, and if there's anything that they would like us to remove from the film, or they feel should not be there, we would remove it. So that's, I think people have a right to control how they want to be seen. So for me, that I mean, for both of us, I think that would be the primary ethical imperative. As regards the idea of right and wrong, and how one sort of negotiates that through the film in terms of what to include or what not to include, I think that's a very slippery terrain. And I think a lot of the time we are not open to listening to voices that are different from our own. We are not open to diversity. We are not open to what shall I say, being surprised or being contradicted, or even feeling angry or feeling disturbed. And I think a film has a right to do that.
Yeah, in fact, going back to this idea of the prison film, for instance, we've decided, there are a couple of things that we decided programmatically before we even started shooting. One is that we're not going to ask about crimes, because that would immediately set up a dividing wall between us as quote-unquote law-abiding, as opposed to, people in conflict with law, the normal and the deviant and stuff like that. All dividing practices will automatically kick in. So we decided not to go there at all. The other thing we decided, which of course, which we continue to practice, is the idea of seeking the consent of, and also take on board the fact that we are not going to violate the dignity of the subject that we are working with. So in the case of ICP, for instance, we decided not to shoot in any of the private spaces that they occupy. Because the very fact that we are law-abiding allows us to go into the prison. Because reciprocally, nobody can walk into my house and start shooting without my consent.
Correct.
There are gatekeeping of various kinds. So we decided that we'll apply the same principle there. We won't walk into any of the spaces, but stick to public spaces within the prison. And we have shot, spaces which are private, but when there's no human beings there, or just kind of evocatively show the idea of the prison. But we have never shown anybody sitting in a cell, or holding onto bars and looking wistfully into the horizon. That kind of, which is cliches which easily come to your mind. So we decided not to do that. And the first thing that we did when we make films, which we continue to do even today, is that we will always show the film to the subjects that we have worked with and get their consent. If they say, please remove this shot, that's first thing that we do. Fortunately, we have not had that situation where people have asked us to remove, because we always keep that in mind. And secondly, there might be things which people say, but I would use my discretion not to include it. For instance, a prisoner might have said something which kind of if I put that in the film can bring that person into conflict with the authorities of the prison. So which I would not want to go there at all. So I may decide not to use it. Just because because it's my choice of, whether they might be wanting to tell things which, but I think it's, if I feel that it's going to endanger the subject in question, I would not go there at all.
So I want to do a little creative exercise in this context. Imagine we were making, like, this is a discussion. We got together to explore the idea of a theme for a new documentary. And the central theme is to actually understand the perspective of the forces that are prevailing social psychology right now, from the beginning of the Ram Janmabhoomi movement, through Babri Masjid demolition, various riots, or maybe even Gujarat riots, all of that, but to understand their perspective and to present a documentary. What kind of approach and what kind of a message and a framework would we adopt for making us a documentary like this?
Actually, it brings to mind a very interesting documentary that was made by a student of ours in Ayodhya. It's a short documentary, about a half an hour one, called Chai Darbari. And what he does is, the whole documentary is in a tea shop. Around a tea shop, and it's a tea shop where all kinds of, it's a tea shop of a kind of quote unquote lower caste person, but all kinds of people assemble there to drink tea, including people who were, hardcore kind of, some people who even participated in the, demolition of, the Babri Masjid, the people, lower caste people who are, and it's absolutely fascinating. He just spent, I think, like maybe a month there and observed and recorded conversations. And he just puts them together with sometimes showing the characters, sometimes just showing the space around. And it's fascinating, and it sort of questions many of the stereotypes that, we have about, the way in which sort of, I would say, the social discourse kind of takes place, and the very kind of course, a lot of it, there's a lot of, four-letter words that are being used, but there's a lot of heated sort of debate that's taking place, between, around issues of caste, around issues of religion, and it's not, I think it's, in that sense, it's a very open-ended text that allows you to, make sense of it. And I think it's more effective than something that would try to, present, the sort of, what shall I say, those who have a certain kind of fundamentalist way of thinking as one thing, I think I really, you should see that film sometime.
Absolutely. I would love to see it. And Jayasankar, what's your view on my question?
Yeah, the film that we talked about is called Nata, which is set in Dharavi. So it's about this school administrator called Bahu Korde, who lives on the periphery of Dharavi. And his friend called Wakar Khan, he's basically a migrant from UP who has come to Bombay, and he started selling bananas on the street, and he's not an educated person at all. So when after the 92 riots, they felt that something needs to be done. So there was this Mohalla committees that were neighborhood peace committees that were set up. And then that's how he meets Bao. And Bao says he has not had many Muslim friends in any case. And he also didn't have any Hindu friends. And then their friendship grew. And they were different people altogether. And then Wakar met us at a point where he had this idea of making a film, which is he had made a poster of 4 boys dressed up as different religions. There's one boy dressed up as a Muslim boy, another one as Christian, Sikh, and Hindu. It's like a poster, and he spent his own money to say, "Hum sab ek hai." And that's how he started his media, and I mean, his foray into media. And then after that, it became a great big success. And then he decided to make a film. And that's where we meet him. He started making a film, and then we decided to follow him making that film. And the film was a very short clip where he heard a story in Gujarat after the earthquake on the 26th of Jan that happens, where they were all leading a rally. And these 4 boys that he had in the photograph were there in that rally. You know, different boys dressed up as different religion. And in fact, the boy who dressed up as a Hindu is his own son. Because nobody else was willing to kind of, you know, shave their head and become like a Brahmin priest, so to speak. So, and then he heard the story that there were one Muslim boy was rescued by a Hindu man from the debris, and a Hindu boy was rescued by a Muslim man. You know, so and he decided to make a film on this.
लेकिन आज जो देश के हालात हैं, तो मुझे और लोगों को ये महसूस हुआ यहाँ के कि आज देखने से काम नहीं चलेगा, कि हमें भी कुछ आगे बढ़ के कुछ करना चाहिए। कि पहले हमारी सोच थी कि ये फिल्म लाइन या बहुत बड़े होर्डिंग जो लगते हैं, ये बहुत बड़ी कंपनी या बहुत बड़े लोग ही कर सकते हैं, लेकिन यहाँ के लोगों में ये विश्वास आया कि नहीं, ये हम खुद करेंगे। और किस तरह से करेंगे, क्या मैसेज होगा, क्योंकि उनके मैसेज देने का ढंग एक अलग होता है, लेकिन एक नीचे के लोग जो मैसेज तैयार करते हैं तो वो प्रैक्टिकल होता है। तो आज ये जो हम में कॉन्फिडेंस आया है कि हम खुद ये काम करेंगे।
बच्चे को खून की सख्त जरूरत है। मेरा खून दे दीजिए।
हम एक थे, एक हैं, एक रहेंगे।
And the film is very simplistic in the sense that, I mean, at least we thought in the beginning, they find these boys and they bring them to the hospital, and the blood of the Muslim father doesn't match with his son's. I mean, and the other way around. So both the parents are there. So the Hindu man decides to give blood to the Muslim boy, and the other way. That's a film, and then they kind of hug each other and said, "Hum sab ek hai." And the blood is transfused directly. You know, all that. He doesn't take on board all these. And she told us about this, so we decided to start making, following on this film. And when we use this as an opportunity to kind of question the notion of a slum. A slum is a misnomer where you actually used to talk about people who are materially challenged, or people with financial difficulties live, and where their housing is below par. So, but he always uses the word slum, which is a misnomer. So we wanted to look at this idea and also talk about Dharavi as a space of productivity and warmth. The Dharavi produces, I mean, at least in those days, as per a National Geographic report, $750 million worth of goods. But it occupies only very little land, but very packed. So all that is something that we had in mind. So the film tries to bring in all these complexities. But coming back to this story back again, they said, in fact, in the film, they discuss this. Secular people make good films, and only secular people watch it, and they have secular discussions. So he's making fun of people like us who make these films. And they said, we do not want a film that would talk about the cause of the riots or, analysis and all that. We want a film that will bring in harmony. So that's what they were making. So in our film, we wanted to concentrate on that idea. What is it that is possible? So we were also, the idea of reflexivity that we talked about. We decided to include our own stories into the film for various reasons. In the sense that it's kind of the story of Waqar and the story of Bao and the story of the two of us as people from different religions, people who are met in a city. And we have a daughter who has her own concerns as a small child too,
And questions of identity. Who she is.
So we've kind of incorporated all that into the film just to ensure the fact that it's not that we do not have, as middle class people, we do not have questions of identity. It's not riots and communal violence is not restricted to poor people or quote unquote slums, but it is something that we need to collectively explore. And so therefore the idea of, they keep on talking about this idea that, that's the kind of film that I want to see, where people, and Waqar's film is a classic example of that film. And the whole film is about his making that film and his attitude. And he says, he always thought that making a film is an activity that is only professionals can do. And he realizes that, they can themselves do it. And, the camera crew, the entire team that worked on the film, all from Dharavi. And there were actual doctors involved in hospitals and actual, the whole entire community was there,
several hundred people.
Several hundred people. And we were with our tiny camera following this process.
So let me ask you one question on this. This Dharavi movie, yes, they took charge of the content and the story. Kind of, there was still a message there, which was like a happy ending or a happy layer to it. But what about a movie that doesn't have hope or a happy ending? So the specific question is this challenge that I give to all of us to construct the story from the perspective of the radicalized people who participated in all these atrocities from our perspective. Does it have a place? And can we actually create a movie knowing our values, our perspectives, that doesn't impose our ethical framework on that? And what impact would it have? Do we fear that such a film would have to be censored by us?
Mm-hmm.
There are like too many questions I asked, but this is like a complex set of questions I wanted to pose.
Yeah, we'll go back to the idea of Sutradhar. As curators, we are kind of dealing with multiple narratives, with not just one single way of looking at the world, because all narratives are open to, and their reception is very dynamic. There are a lot of possibilities that arise. For example, if I might change tracks a little, we worked in Kutch for about 9 years. So one of the films, which is called So Hoda, which means like here, like there, it's set within a community called Fakirani Jats. And the entire repertoire, cultural repertoire is kind of, they owe it to a medieval Sufi poet called Shah Abdul Latif Bhitai, who lived a little after, say, Kabir. And he lived in Sindh. And Sindh and Kutch are close to each other. I mean, in the sense that divided by the Rann. So from Sindh, he kind of travels to India. He goes to Punjab, Rajasthan. So he's influenced by Advaita Vedanta. He's influenced by Sikhism, Guru Nanak's work. And then he's also influenced by Islamic Sufi traditions. So he kind of goes back to, and he's always written about all his work is on lovers who cannot meet. So unfulfillment is at the end of the story, like Greek tragedies or whatever. So it's about lovers. And he uses it as a metaphor to kind of talk about human condition, that we all, unfulfillment awaits all of us. though we think that nothing, at the end of the day, we all die, so so that's the idea that he works with. And we worked with three cousins. One of them plays a very ancient instrument called surando, and he's a truck driver. And this is the only surando in that region, and he's the only person who can play it. And he can't just do it for a living because he has to drive his truck. The second cousin is the person who sings the verses of Bithai. He cannot read or write, but they know the verses. And the third cousin is an older person in his 70s at the moment. And he breathes. He doesn't know much reading or writing. I mean, he can't read or write, but he knows enough to kind of get around. You talk about the weather, he'll quote Bithai. So he kind of talks one story about Bithai, is that he says one big scholar took 2 lines of Bithai and did 360 interpretations of those 2 lines. And then he took it to Bithai and said, so Bithai looked at it and said, very encouragingly, said, it's great. You've done a great job, but you can do a little more with it. So the idea that one structure is always one meaning, the idea of certainty, which is violent. When you say this means this and nothing else, my narrative means this and nothing else, it's a violence. It's I'm kind of restricting other readings. So when I say this is Hindu and this is Muslim, there is a violence inherent in that division, which is also there when you say I am normal and you're a criminal.
Correct.
Violence is inscribed.
I really like it. In fact, I was reminded of a film, Rubaru Roshni. Have you seen that film? It's created by Swati Chakravarti Bhatkar, Satyajit Bhatkar's wife. And it gives perspective of different people, including Afzal Guru. And there's different places where people who are victims come back and try to have kind of a new perspective of the perpetrators of the victim. It's one of the nurses in Kerala who was killed by fanatical forces. Then there was another example, and Afzal Guru is also in there. Very interesting one is where, like, essentially she's just presenting a different perspective to our preconceived notions of looking at things and violence in the society. I also, during this whole project, I spoke to Revati Lal. I don't know if you heard about her.
Yeah, of course, we know.
She wrote Anatomy of Hate, and she went and worked. She interviewed for 10 years people who actually participated in the violence in Gujarat. I also interviewed Shabnam Virmani, who created the Kabir Yatra and has created some interesting. So all of these movies are actually giving me a new direction that we shouldn't even, the wrong that we are seeing in the world, we shouldn't shun the people who are participating in the wrong.
Certainly not, because anybody can change. People do change all the time, And in fact, there's an interesting film, 2 films actually made by Lalit Vachani. I don't know if you've seen them. The first one is called A Boy in the Branch, where he follows, an RSS kind of training center where these young boys come and so he's looking at, just observing it, very quiet observational film where he's looking at the kinds of games that they play and how through that there's a certain kind of indoctrination that is taking place. And then I think, I don't know, probably 15 years later.
Yeah, this was made just before the demolition of the Babri Masjid, this Boy in the Branch.
Yeah.
And they were
not just before, it was a while before, I think.
No, around the time, 90,
and then he goes back to the same people many years later. It's called The Men in the Tree, and tries to understand, how they feel about what happened, and it's interesting. Some of them who were a part of the RSS as children have kind of completely repudiated it. Others are still sort of within the movement. Some are like, ambivalent, So it's interesting. We can't sort of label people as something and, put them there without sort of seeing them in all their complexity and the possibilities for change.
So I will say something which is emerging in my mind right now. I have never thought about this before. Your views is revealing that to me. I grew up in a socialist family who were involved with various secular, liberal, progressive movements. And I kind of felt that I was also indoctrinated in that point of view, right? The leftist, secular kind of a mold. I had not consciously, though I was taught compassion, I was taught to treat everyone equally, but I was not necessarily taught to necessarily listen to people we fiercely opposed. The ones who we believed were eroding the social values and things. I was not taught that. But today, when my own sensitivities and curiosities are evolving, I'm beginning to believe more in human craving for harmony, peace, and human comfort with nonviolence. And from that perspective, I'm beginning to feel that even presenting the people who have adopted hatred and violence, bringing it to surface will actually help people at some point see the limitations of that way of thinking. Because they're inherently, we as humans are prone to seek harmony and balance and peace. And I'm sure we see the world, picture of the world today, my view doesn't hold good. There's too much of violence and strife and hatred. But I don't know, what do you think about it?
No, in fact, going back to Kutch, for instance, we just went there as tourists. And then we met some of these musicians who have kind of, there's an organization called Kutch Mahila Vikas Sangathan. They kind of, Shabnam has worked with them as well.
I know, actually, I have interviewed her also.
Right. So, so we met some of these musicians and we decided and as I said, some of the instruments are disappearing, like Surandu, which I talked about earlier. So we thought we'll just kind of document the music. And that's how it started. We started in 2008, I think. And we worked we kept going back there till 2017. And we made 3 films and we have much more material. We have a huge archive, which we have not, we can make at least a couple of films more, but we have not done that as yet. So, what kind of intrigued us was the fact that though Kutch is in Gujarat, it is a very multi-ethnic society. And there was when there was ethnic violence in Gujarat, there was nothing happened in Kutch, and we decided to kind of see what is this makes a place like this tick, so to speak, and then we realized it is a Sufi tradition. They just talked about this whole idea of oral traditions, which kind of Sufism, which kind of celebrates diversity. Hundreds of different 360 plus interpretations is better than just one interpretation. And how, for instance, these traditions, these little traditions are actually well springs of, they are bulwarks against growing hatred, intolerance.
Absolutely, I agree with you.
And the last film that we made, one of the episodes in there is set in a place called Lakpat. Lakpat is an old city, and the port city, Indus, the river Sindhu used to flow that way, and there was an earthquake and the river shifted to current day Pakistan, and that port became almost defunct, so to speak. And it's an old fort and it's an ancient city. And in fact, Guru Nanak came there to go to Mecca to learn about Islam. which of course he incorporated into Sikhism. So he just came there to take a boat to Mecca and came back there. And there's an ancient Gurudwara. And that particular, it's a village. The Sarpanch we worked very closely with him. He's a musician. And the village has 24 masjids, 24 temples and 24 dargahs. And, you know, when we were just shooting there, so that Sarpanch is called Ramsan Bhai. He had a group of women, the only women's group. We were documenting various musical groups and only women's group in Kutch who would perform. So Muslim women. And he was the one who kind of is like an anchor person, and he played the harmonium. And then we wanted to document that. Let's kind of document record the music. And he said, let's go into the nearest temple. All of them walked in there. All religious thing. And then, of course, we thought that the acoustics was not very great. Then he said, let's go to the Gurudwara. All of them went to Gurudwara. We sat there. We were amazed at the kind of, they were not educated, they were not intellectuals, but, the kind of wisdom they brought to bear is amazing.
By the way, you should check out my dialogue with Sushma Iyengar also. It's sitting on my YouTube. Yesterday, 2 days ago, when I was talking to Medha, she also pointed out that even Ayodhya has a tradition of intercultural, interfaith living, where Muslims actually weave the fabric, the gamchas that carry Jai Shri Ram kind of messages on them. They bring flowers to sell in the temples there. And that's the kind of fabric that was existing, which has now changed. Anyway, I want to move to a new question. You guys created this media unit at Tata Institute of Social Sciences. My question is important for our audience 50 years from now, 30 years from now. When fresh students come to your school, what do you tell them? What are they there to learn? And what are they going to do? What is their mission that you express to them? How do you open their curiosity and creativity for the future? Is there a message you give as a foundational message to the students?
Yeah, well, the sort of the credo of the school was to be a doing thinker and a thinking doer. So I guess we try to get them to look critically at themselves and the world around them, and to figure out how they want to creatively contribute to social change, or more than that, contribute to the development of certain kinds of values, certain kinds of openness, certain kinds of, spaces of tolerance, compassion, collaboration, sharing. So I think broadly, even the way the curriculum is structured is sort of brings together theory and practice in interesting ways. Or at least that's been our attempt in devising the curriculum. I mean, they do projects in communities. And then they also face a lot of difficulty when doing that, because many of them are not from the city. Some of them have problems with language and all of that. And but I think they learn a lot from that process. And we insist that they give back to the community also. And that, so for instance, once the films they make are ready and they're screened, they bring they invite their subjects to come for the screening, and things like that. So I think the program also tries to create interfaces with communities within the city, particularly marginalized communities.
I'm going to add one more question to Jayasankar before you respond to this question. The new layer is, when I think of Tata Institute of Social Science, it has a rich history of social sciences consciousness. You have bred many social workers, professional social workers in the Indian society. placing this media unit in Tata Institute of Social Sciences, what unique learning opportunity does it offer to us, an interested student versus going to FTII or Xavier's or Jamia Millia? And I'm not asking you to how they are different, but I'm asking more about what is so distinct about TISS and your vision for housing a learning program there.
Yeah. When you say media education in India, it's generally professional media education. That means, you're taught to be a specialist, either an editor, a camera person, or, a director. And then basically your role is to kind of contribute to the industry. You become part of the media industry, so to speak. That's your, there are people, I'm not saying that everybody follows that path. People stray away from that. Very few people actually stick to that path. So our idea, it was to kind of, create, first of all, respond to the changing media ecologies, which means that you don't need to have specialists No, I can be a camera person. Now we are using a technology, we are shooting ourselves, we are talking to each other, we are recording it and stuff like that. So there are ways in which you can do that very easily. The technology itself becomes much more accessible. So given that, what is it that you bring to the table? So what we bring to the idea is the idea of social work. Since we are within an institution of social work, it's in our DNA to have rights-based approach to things. So even our media work is within that horizon, and also a strong community focus. Work with communities, learn from them, and not just learn about them, or kind of make films about them, but make films with them, so to speak. So these are some of the ideas that and we also kind of underplay this whole idea of skills. So as, we both actually just started we're both academics who just kind of strayed into filmmaking, and we muddle through and kind of still learning technology or, the idea of filmmaking. But the learning the technology part was much easier. I don't think we took a long time for us to master that technology, at least video or digital technology. But I still find it difficult to make a film. So the idea that we emphasize is that if you want to write a book, skills like word processing does help. But more important is to have a perspective as to what kind of book are you going to write? What is it? How do I insert myself into the world of books? So we emphasize a lot on perspective, and we emphasize social justice and equity, which is part of the mandate of TISS into the process of filmmaking. So if I put to kind of sum up, is that the idea of rights-based education, the idea of social justice and equity, and more emphasis on perspective rather than just skills. Or no, I'm not saying that other institutions do not do it, but this is we have a significant emphasis on these ideas. Now, you mentioned Jamia, or there are other. They will do that as well. It's not just skills alone, but since we have kind of somehow managed to.
I think you answered it very clearly. I have two more questions, and we'll end this session. One is, again, having grown up in the family of idealists, with the community of idealists, I find one thing missing in all the revolutionaries and social reformers, not completely missing, but it's not dominant part, is humor. When I see Charlie Chaplin, and I'm deeply inspired by Charlie Chaplin, he used humor to address some really deeply rooted problems in the society. What are your views on using humor in serving the objectives that you just stated?
Yeah, I think it's very important, and one should use humor whenever it is possible, because I think, through humor, you can do so many different things, whether you use it as satire, whether you use it to, diffuse tension, whether you use it, use it to show the absurdity of the world. I mean, there's so many different ways in which one can use humor. And in fact, today you see, I mean, a lot of the sort of strongest critiques of the present regime are coming from people who are from stand-up comedians, you know.
Yes.
And I think they really hit hard. So I think humor can do many things that you know, more serious political commentary sometimes cannot.
वो फ्लाइट एक और ड्रॉप लिया, बुड्ढा सीट बेल्ट खोला, खड़ा हुआ और चिल्लाया जोर से बोलो, और कोई सपोर्ट नहीं किया, बिकॉज अभी सबका फेथ साइंस में है।
ट्रेलर आपने देखा होगा, उसमें एक बहुत फेमस लाइन जो बहुत मीम हो गया है उसका, मेरा गुजरात जल रहा है, लाइक नाथुराम गोडसे सेइंग मेरा गांधी मर रहा है।
देखे भाई टीवी पे क्या न्यूज है। कहाँ छुपा बैठा है नेहरू? कोई शर्म है? ड्रग दो मुझे टीआरपी दो, मुझे पैसा दो, मुझे वोट दो, मुझे फायदा दो।
And it reaches you at an affective level. It you know, it charges you in a particular way. It has a certain kind of energy to it.
Jayasankar, how about you? Any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think it's also, I mean, you laughing is, I mean, you kind of, humor is a very, very, very significant idea that we've tried incorporating it into our work, particularly laughing at us, you know, and ourselves, not so because we take ourselves too seriously, particularly people like us who belong to university system. We think that we know everything, you know, we're omniscient, and you know, we have to just tell these illiterate, ignorant. These are words used very, you know, without, I mean, seamlessly. Villagers how to run their lives, or you know, you throw some switch and things would become better and stuff like that. So I think it's important that we laugh at ourselves. Absolutely. And use this opportunity of our encounter with people who are less privileged, who are probably much wiser than us, and who kind of much more experience, grounded experience, and use that occasion to laugh at us, you know. So
and I not just that, also I have learned that what people pose to be as valor that promotes violence is actually ridiculous. and I think that the ridiculosity of that needs to be exposed. And I have learned that autocrats can be defeated not through violence, but by turning them into comic characters.
Yeah.
And I think ridiculing them, turning them into characters in a satire is the best way to get people to see how ridiculous not only are they, but they are turning people into.
Mm-hmm.
So my last question now is, what is your message to youngsters 50 years from now? How might they walk on the path you have walked? What are their opportunities? What is their mission? What is their purpose?
I don't think we have any message really. At least I don't have any message. I would say you muddle along with the questions in your head, but always keep asking questions, and don't stay stagnant and still. Don't become complacent.
Yeah.
I think that's very important. Question yourself, question the spaces you are in, question authority.
Question your privileges.
Yeah. Look at power critically, look at power with humor, and look at people with compassion, perhaps.
And not lose track of the ideas of social justice and equity, which is the most significant ideas that you can animate all your work and your life. You know? So whatever you do, I mean, I don't want to say it as a message, because that's something that I think we found more significant in our work. You know,
this is so beautiful. This is very beautiful, and I think I knew people who came out of Tata Institute of Social Science, but to hear this from you as this being the core belief and mission of Tata Institute gives me a lot of hope. And also in the wake of like there being a lot of this mental model amongst the reformist social justice people that corporate is always bad. Knowing that Tatas have actually sponsored and incubated and supported something like this is really a nice thing to know. We indeed have made a lot of progress since independence. Progress didn't begin 10 years ago.
Yes, definitely not.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So this was so rich. I hope you enjoyed the conversation.
We did, of course.
Thoroughly.
Thank you so much for reaching out to us. It was.